Howdy, and welcome to another update on the state of the tanks in the beta. This week's update is going to be quite a bit shorter than previous weeks for a couple of reasons. One reason is we're working on some bigger updates and discussions for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be releasing our current tier list, as well as the first of our tank deep dives next week. Be sure to subscribe if you want to be notified when those go live. The bigger reason for the small update, though, is that in the last 7 to 10 days, just very little has changed for the tanks. Tank tuning just doesn't seem to have been a big priority during the pre-patch rollout. Blood Decay and Prot Paladin have seen essentially no changes, and Vengeance saw only a small buff to their Sigil of Flame. We're going to skip out on talking more about those classes until we get into next week. I will go ahead, though, and mention a few things about the other classes. The biggest change to talk about today came in the form of a significant nerf to Protection Warrior utility. If you watched our last videos, you know I talked a lot about the strength of Unbreakable Will and Mythic Plus, especially if combined with a movable object. These talents together allowed you to have an absurd uptime on a 20% party-wide damage reduction. Unfortunately, Blizzard agreed that the talents were too strong and completely removed Unbreakable Will in the most recent set of changes. Realistically, this talent was just too strong for Blizzard to successfully tune around. Having it in the game would also have left Prot Warriors having to make choices between their own survivability and damage versus the survivability of the group, which I know some players weren't excited about. I personally enjoyed the playstyle, though, and hope to see some iteration of Unbreakable Will in future updates. As for where that leaves Warrior, in the tree, Unbreakable Will was replaced with Defender's Aegis, which grants an extra charge of shield wall and reduces the recharge rate by 30 seconds. I think that barring a large change to the amount of incoming damage, both Defender Aegis and now a movable object will almost never be taken, apart from niche cases where you have specific damage events you need to reduce. Even without Unbreakable Will, Warriors are currently an incredibly strong and fun-to-play tank. Before the change, Warriors were the hands-down favorite to be the leading tank in the Mythic Plus meta in Dragonflight. This change will likely go a long way in bringing Warrior in line with the power level of other tanks. While I'm personally a little disappointed, I'm not particularly surprised to see it go. In our last video, we were fresh off changes to Ursoc's Fury shielding that brought its power down significantly. I mentioned that I thought a bug fix to Guardian's Moonfire damage could go a long way in making up for that. While I didn't mention it by name, the bug I was talking about was that Elun's Favored was only granting 10% bonus damage to Moonfire instead of the 30% listed in the tooltip. Blizzard addressed the issue, but by going the opposite direction we'd hoped. Instead of fixing the talent to do what the tooltip said, they changed the tooltip to reflect how it was actually behaving on the beta. This means that the actual damage and survivability didn't change for Guardian on the beta, but the hope for a boon to Moonfire damage is likely gone. Without a doubt, there is still tuning to be done, but the impression this gives is that Blizzard thinks Guardian damage and healing is about where it should be. This would leave Guardian Druid slightly behind other tanks in AoE damage, and slightly further behind in single target damage, particularly if you're not the type of player to try to weave Cat and Boomkin form in during off-tank globals. Guardian is still a reasonably stout tank. They are more self-sufficient during non-incarn pulls than in Shadowlands, and if you're willing to sacrifice a bit of damage for an easier-to-maintain playstyle, they'll still be viable in Mythic Plus and Raid. The only other significant tuning to tanks in the last week or so was a nerf to the Monk talent, Strength of Spirit. The bonus healing to expel harm based on how low your HP is was halved from 200% to 100%. There was some speculation that this was intended as a nerf more to Windwalker or PvP, and Brewmaster merely got caught up in it, but regardless of the intent, it is a pretty significant nerf to Brewmaster's biggest self-heal. Even before this nerf, we had some concerns with Brewmaster Mythic Plus. Losing healing from Expel Harm wouldn't necessarily be as bad if they had other strong ways to self-heal. As is, Brewmaster receives 18% extra healing. That makes it easier for healers to top them off, but in a meta where healers expect tanks to largely be self-sufficient, Brewmaster ends up needing more healer attention than any other tank. This is the kind of thing that could be fixed with a wave of the tuning wand, but as it is right now, Brewmaster is looking like the high damage, low survivability tank. Damage is great in Mythic Plus, but that doesn't mean your healers will thank you. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. Heading into next week, we're going to have some visual improvements to the channel rolling out. We're going to be releasing our current tier list, as well as starting to roll out our spec deep dives. So if you don't want to miss anything, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next one.